All right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to Captain's Table. This is our second Captain's Table in a week. We're doing a lot of special ones for you, given that this market is moving so quickly. And we've been putting our collective heads together to check that we've got some really good content for you. Our Captain's Table, as you know, is our owners and leaders group for recruitment industry owners. We'll be delivering you very hard-hitting content at a very low price, and it'll be very up-to-date with what's happening in the market. And this is in conjunction with Consultants Table, which is run by Adele Last, who's doing a brilliant job and getting some very big numbers. She's providing some very, very good training and development for you on Consultants Table, and her session is on at 12 next week. I said 12 tomorrow, 12 p.m. tomorrow, and she's covering recruiter survival skills in tough markets. So very, very good skills for your recruiters who are changing from a very candidate short market quickly into a job short market for most of you. So looking forward to your session tomorrow, Adele. But before we get started and I hand you over to our guest presenter, I'd like to very much acknowledge all our supporters. And you probably know we've got 5 supporters, that JobAdder, who provides a very, very seamless cloud solution as a recruitment management system. And those of you that are working your staff at home, which is most of us now, JobAdder has been brilliant at making that transition. It's been absolutely seamless. And they've been offering a lot of resources at no charge as well to help people. A positive on the finance side, you can't go past them for great ideas on finance, on debt collection, on anything side of things. And then I'm just checking here, I need to make sure you're all muted, please. And then Digit Pro for accounting, for bookkeeping rather. Digit Pro are the recruitment industry bookkeepers now. They do some very, very good work, very efficient. And right now your numbers are extremely important to know where you're at. Succession Plus, who have spoken before, they've got a very good ESOP program for staff retention and motivation, particularly during tough times. And I encourage you to reach out to them for a great program to retain your best people. And then finally, William Buck, who have joined us recently, specialist accountants to the recruitment industry. You're getting a hugely high quality accounting at much lower price than the Big Four, obviously, but they've been really good and they really understand the recruitment industry well. And once again, this is the time to make sure you've got very good financial managers helping you in your business, because it's the most important time to be doing that right now. So thank you all very much. Thank you those supporters for continuing their support of Captain's Table. It's very much appreciated. And I encourage all of you that are on this call today, if you're not using any of these companies, at least make contact with them, because they have a very unique insight, as I've mentioned many times, into our industry. They're working with many recruitment companies, and there's a lot of value add that they can give you even beyond the services that they provide. So please build a relationship with them, even if you're not ready to do any changeover. You'll find them very valuable, and I know they're all open to help you because they're very supportive of the recruitment industry. So again, thank you very much for joining us. Now I'd like to hand over to one of our almost regular speakers on Captain's Table, Martin Richardson. Martin, it's great to have you speaking again today. I mean, some of the most important aspects of what's been going on lately have a very legal flavour to them, and it's really good that we've got you as a very, very strong specialist in the recruitment industry, because you know exactly what the industry is requiring at the moment. You know some of the ideas that you can really help support them in, and it's really, really, we're really grateful you're sharing your time with us today to articulate some of the areas you can really help with, particularly around temp and contract, which are coming to the forefront of what we're doing in recruitment in this current market. So I'm going to pass over to you, Martin. Thank you very much for being with us today, and over to you. 1 second, please.
You can hear me okay?
We can hear you well, and I'm just going to make you the host now, Martin.
All right.
And your screen going forward.
Okay, so I will share my screen. Thank you, Tony. And let's make sure we get this working. Okay. Okay, can we see the screen, the slides?
Looks good, Martin.
Okay. Are you seeing my full screen or one with my notes?
We're seeing your notes.
All right. Is that better?
That's good. That's it.
Okay. Thank you. The joys of split screen. Now, Tony, I can't see chat, so if and we may as well start with questions before I dive in. If people have questions, there'll be time at the end for questions. So perhaps if you can just pop your questions into the chat, and Tony, if you could grab those questions as we go, that would be fantastic, and we will come to those at the end. So welcome everyone. I know it's a busy time. There are many phrases that we're hearing at the moment: unprecedented, uncharted, flatten the curve. We're hearing lots of things at the moment. I'll try not to use any of them. The last couple of weeks have been really interesting for me as a lawyer and an advisor to recruitment businesses and also some other businesses that I service. Lots of questions around employment, lots of questions around reduction of staffing hours, redundancies, unfortunately, stand downs and the like. So there's a lot of this going on, and I completely understand that. Today's session is not actually about any of that. So we're focused today on the opportunities and the challenge within your contracting and staffing businesses. So I'm happy to deal with those questions, offline, because I have been answering them. But just to be clear, today's session is not about any of those things, and there's plenty of information out there already about those things. So when we're talking about today's session, critical issues, and Tony mentioned, this has really come into the fore and sharpen the focus, I guess, for me as well. It's an area that I probably focus on mainly in my practice and my work with recruiters is the contracting and staffing side, not so much the perm. I assist with perm, but it's the issues in the contracting and staffing business, which have always been there, but are really starting to come to the fore now with this sudden economic downturn. So today, we're going to look at those things. I'm going to talk about what I call my three key pillars. But what you're also going to hear me talk about are hidden profit killers. So I talk about hidden profit killers regularly. And what I mean by that is really the things that are sitting in your business and in your temp and staffing business that are cost and time killers. So they're hiding in there, but they are potentially impacting your profit today. And have the ability to impact in the future if things happen that you're not ready for. They're going to impact your bottom line, and particularly in the contracting space. And you might not even know they're there, and that's why we're here today. So I really want to take you through a few of those things so you're a bit more tuned in to what I'd like you to be thinking about. So today I'm going to show you how to spot some major profit killers and ones that I deal with regularly. Going to reduce, hopefully, if you get something out of this, hopefully you'll reduce your exposure to disputes and costs, and in the short term and in the long term, so something sustainable as well. I want you to think differently about legals, and those of you who are my clients, and there are a few on there, great to see you here, and those who've heard me speak before probably hear me talk about thinking differently about your legals. And often I say, no one wakes up in the morning and, stretches their, gets out of bed, stretches their legs and stretches their arms, says, gee, I wish I had a better contract today. No one says that. But this is about expanding, I guess, your thinking around what better legals or different legals look like and a different approach to your business. And importantly, like anything in business, today I want you to, perhaps think a bit more, not even think more, because I know you think about this, but I want you to take out of this, the ability to pursue integrity and authenticity with your clients. And again, something I always say is being assertive and firm in your views and in protecting your business and building your business doesn't mean the same as being difficult to do business with. Being assertive is not being difficult to do business with. It's about protecting what's important to you and making sure you can grow sustainably. And clients will respond to that when you are authentic and when you have integrity in your approach to your business. And playing to your strengths, right? I'm the lawyer, I'm not the recruiter. and you guys, you guys are fantastic at what you do, experts in what you do, and this is about helping you play to your strengths. So, what I'd like to think today is, as you start moving on this journey, is once you start to fix some of these things, you'll spend less time worrying about it. And we've got lots of worries at the moment. Worrying about whether you are legally compliant and whether you've got some problems in your business is probably not something you need to be worrying about as much right now. I want you to feel more control in your business, knowing what's important to you. And I also, want you to be able to rely on your colleagues more if you have them in your business, and staff to act in your interest. This is a vital point that you hopefully will get out of today. It's about you being able to lean on people that you rely on in your business to help you remain compliant and do the right thing, and be assertive and not be difficult to do business with. So I want you to, sorry, my slide, I'm working a split screen here, so I'm having some difficulty with my, I'm just going to move this. There we go. That's better. So there is going to be a recovery. Okay. So what that recovery looks like, there's lots of debate about it, but there will be a recovery, and the world of working is changing. So it's going to look very different for your industry. It's really hard at the moment for you. It's hard for me as a small business owner. There will be a recovery. And this is about thinking about how you're going to set yourself up for that recovery. My own personal view is there's some things happening now in the world of staffing that who knows about short-term decisions being made now by the government and by companies, and what impact is that going to have. And the example I use is the large corporates that are providing sick leave to casuals who are having to quarantine or self-isolate. It's a fantastic initiative by Wesfarmers and a few of the other large corporates. What are the ramifications for that in the future, when one of the things with casual is flexibility, and one of the arguments made by big business is particularly, well, we pay a loading and we can't really afford to be paying the sick leave. We have a situation now where, in a particularly difficult time for these large corporates, when their profits are dropping, their revenues dropping, they are paying for sick leave. So what happens when the recovery happens and these companies, they can't fall back on that argument anymore? So what's this going to look like? And this is, again, just a personal view, but there's some short-term decisions being made. What are the ramifications going to be for this industry and pricing and modelling? It could look very different. So me, 20 years, I've been a business lawyer working in various roles. I spent about 12 years of my career in corporates, so law firms and into corporates. So I've spent a lot of time in business and in large business. Part of that and my background and I guess why I do what I do today is I spent nearly 4 years at Adecco running the legal team there for Australia and New Zealand. So that 4 years was hectic, organised chaos as it was, and I learned a lot. I have a lot of war stories. It really gave me the passion that I have for the industry and for an industry which puts people into work. So, that's my background, and I've been doing this now in my own business for 3 years, and my portfolio now of recruitment clients is probably 70% of my business and growing. So it's an area I spend a lot of time in. I am a dad to a 3-year-old Jasper who arrived on a Saturday, and I left my corporate career on the Friday. So I have 2 3-year-olds as I say. So it's busy. So I have my own interests as a family man and my interests as a small business person as well in the current environment. So I understand the challenges for all of you in that space as well. And what do I do? Well, I've thought about this recently, and I'm going to get to a point in a second. But when I think about what I do, I make no bones about this. I help you create a recruitment business that's better than your competition. And, some may think that's a fairly aggressive statement. The reason I say it is because this is the number one excuse I hear from recruiters. When I give them advice, particularly in the contracting space and things I'm going to be talking about today, if I do that, I won't be competitive. So this is a compliance issue, and when we will be talking about this. So to me, when I hear that, I think, well, I want to help businesses be better than the competition. I don't want to have recruitment businesses who are worried about doing something that their competition is doing, regardless of whether it's the right thing, the legal thing, the ethical thing. So my mindset is we want to be better than our competition. And some of you may be competitors on here, but that's what I do. And that's what gets me out of bed, making sure that you have a business which is better than your competition and can grow effectively. So enough about that. Let's dive in and let's get into some content. So my 3 pillars, and my 3 pillars are the 3 aspects that I focus on that I guess prop up all the 3 things that within your recruitment business as I see it. And today I'm going to touch on each of those 3 pillars, and I'm going to have what I call a de-risking strategy for each of those pillars so you can understand the themes and the threads around your contracting and temp business based on what I work on, what I see, and where I see the opportunities and the challenges for you. Contractors is your first pillar in this space. Your clients are your second pillar, and your consultants. Now, by consultant, I mean a person who is selling, interacting with contractors or clients. So if you're running your own business, you're a business leader, a senior manager, that is you as well. So they're the 3 pillars, and they all intersect, obviously, and all touch on each other. So if we talk about, and in the notes that went out for this session, there was a reference to the PAYG contractor and what I call is the industry blind spot. Those who've come to captain's tables before in the larger rooms may have a memory of me dancing across a room where I described employees and independent contractors. These are the 2 engagement models at law. One of your contractors is either an employee or they're a genuine independent contractor. If they're an employee, they're probably going to be engaged as a casual employee. They may be a maximum term employee as well. There's nothing else in between until they become a genuine independent contractor. The industry uses phrases like PAYG contractor, ABNs, proprietary limiteds, casuals, flex, contractor, independent contractor, all these different terms. And to me, it's created a bit of an industry blind spot because giving a label to something is not actually determining the employment relationship. So I want you to think about that, and what you call someone in your business is fine. You need to fundamentally understand what the working relationship is between you and that contractor. They're an employee or they're a genuine independent contractor. And we'll talk about that some more. Why this is pertinent now, and I don't know if anyone was on the AppsCo advice line on Friday, and I was one of the panelists on that, and we got a couple of questions through that I answered, and something that I've foreseen is going to happen, and you're probably seeing this, is clients are ending assignments. If clients are ending assignments and you've got someone who's got a long tenure and they are engaged as a genuine independent contractor, to give you an example, they then, if they've been there for a long time and they've been doing the same hours, the same job, if they then decide that they want to seek a declaration from Fair Work or from a court that they are in fact an employee at law, that will leave you with dealing with that, but a potential payout based on what may be employee entitlements that the Fair Work Commission declares them as an employee can then make a claim for. So in a downturn, this issue, which I deal with all the time, is becoming very much a sharpened issue for the industry because assignments are being ended. So this could not be a more relevant topic than today. And I don't want to be alarmist, but I'm going to be alarmist actually, because the hard truth and the brutal truth is, and someone asked this on the AppsCo, they made the comment within the question, they felt like they're an insurance company for their clients by accepting, by being insured for the employment risk. That's the business model. You are taking on that risk, and that's what your clients are paying you for. They're paying for the flexibility to outsource their workforce to you. So you can't get away from that, and it's becoming more prevalent as we hit harder economic times, that their assignments are going to be ended, and that risk is going to sit with you, whatever that looks like. Okay. But the rule book hasn't been thrown out, and the law is still the law. So there's a lot of change going on, but we are not seeing, nothing is changing. And I talked about, the casuals and perhaps something will change in the future around entitlements. But today the law is still the law. If people are doing stand downs, if people are doing reductions of hours, if they're doing things in a way or redundancies that aren't genuine and they effectively expose themselves to an unfair dismissal claim, the law is still the law. The Fair Work Commission is still going to act on those things, and there will be a tail of decisions being made. There will be a tail that will be caught in the future from decisions that weren't made correctly because the law hasn't changed. Things are different, but the rule book has not been thrown out. So, presuming you're all still on the call and I haven't scared you away yet, let's talk about de-risk strategy number 1. And I've touched on it. The de-risk strategy number 1 is around your engagement model with your workforce. So employee and genuine independent contractors. You do risk, if you get that wrong, you risk this deemed liability and a bit of a time bomb sitting in your business, because your workforce will look to you and your clients will be saying, well, it's nothing to do with us. And we'll get to de-risk strategy number 2 with clients in a minute. It's a really difficult and complex area, and I know that it's a real struggle, and it's a struggle for me. But it is not a set and forget model. You have a model where you have a request come in, a job order come in, you find someone, you fill that role. If at some point in time, a few years ago, you went to a lawyer, you went to APSCO, you went to RCSA, and you got template documents, that's great. If you're still using those template documents and you're not actually reviewing and understanding what's happening behind the scenes in that engagement, you are exposing yourself, because dealing with people means, and these contracts and employment means, it's a life cycle. And I call it the employment life cycle, or the contract and life cycle. You made a decision at a certain point in time to engage someone. Let's use a casual as an example. You made a decision on the information you were provided to engage someone as a casual, put them on to a 6-month term. What often, no doubt you see and I see, is that casuals tenure gets extended in a good market. And then the client says, we love working with Sally. We want Sally to stay for another 6 months. So then Sally does another 6 months. This is great. You're now getting, there's margin coming through, and Sally's doing a great job. Sally hits 12 months. Client comes back and says, we're not quite ready for the role, but we love working with Sally. We want to keep Sally for another 6 months. So Sally's there for 18 months. We hit an economic downturn, and the client turns around and says, well, casual, we don't have to give you notice. It's Thursday, 4 o'clock. Sally is no longer required. So Sally will finish up today on 1 hour's notice. Sally isn't happy with that. And Sally says, well, hang on a minute. I've been there for 18 months doing the same role for the same hours at the same location. I believe I'm entitled to permanency and a claim for a declaration that I'm a permanent employee. That tenure and rolling over that tenure means if you're not testing that decision to roll someone over, and if you're not taking control of that decision at a tenure stage based on anything other than the client's happy and Sally's happy, you do risk then exponentially growing an entitlement risk within your business. Genuine independent contractor is the same thing. Someone might start as a genuine independent contractor. They might not even be a genuine independent contractor, but say they are, and we have the same issue. Someone gets rolled over and they may be very disappointed to be finished up on a very short amount of time, and they may then, based on tenure and based on some advice, then go and seek compensation for that. So it sits with you as the employer, and I've said that. It's thinking about life cycle, and it's a holistic thing. You're in the people business, and people, it's a life cycle engagement. So a decision made today, a fully informed decision, this is what I believe this assignment is. It's a casual assignment. We're paying them properly and we're going to engage them correctly, but you need to be testing that if you're going to continue to roll over. If you're using the same agreements you've been using for 5 years, the world has moved on considerably, and there are things that you need to be having in your agreement post-Skeen, particularly Skeen and WorkPro, that you need to be thinking about in your agreement. So a casual agreement from 5 years ago, even 12 months ago, 18 months ago, it may not still have all the protections you need. So it's not set and forget. This is not a set and forget model. It sits with you. So de-risk strategy number 2. This is around your clients. Pillar 2, clients. We've dealt with contractors. We know there's a risk there. We will come to some tools later about how we might be able to deal with that and look to fix that and work out whether we have a problem and what we're going to do going forward. De-risk strategy number 2 is pillar number 2, clients. What are we doing to make sure we're managing our risk? Remember, a client is using you to de-risk. What are you doing to then de-risk the other way, I guess? What are you doing in your contractual obligations or rights in your client contract or terms of business to offset some of that risk? And what I mean by that is, in a perm model, perm is, we will find the person, we will vet them, that's our service, and we will deliver you a shortlist. You will select someone, you'll employ someone, we'll make sure they are vetted and they're the right person, and that's what you pay us for. We will deliver that person, you'll employ them, and you'll pay us a fee. Your risk is not getting paid or having not done your checks properly. If you then start building a contractor business around perm terms, you've got zero, it's a completely different business model. So you've got pretty much zero protection probably from the things that matter in that employment life cycle model. So that's why I use the heading temporary services, but it's a permanent vigilance. You've got to continually test it and understand that there is now a 3-way connection between you, your contractor, and your client. And again, if you've heard me talk or seen some of my content, I talk about 99% of PSAs that I see get it wrong. Client contracts get it wrong. They do not define your service correctly. What is your service in this space? It's filling a job order with a contractor you have sourced according to the requirements. You place that contractor, and then you manage that contractor. You manage their performance, hopefully, and you manage their employment obligations. So what that worker or contractor is doing for the client is not your service. So if you are providing a IT, a systems architect, if you're providing an engineer, are you an engineering design company? If you're providing doctors, are you a medical practice? If you're providing that systems architect, are you an IT consultancy? No, you're not. You're a provider of contract workers, and your service is finding them, providing them, and managing them. If your terms expose you or a PSA gets it wrong and says effectively the service of the contract is your service, you are extending your liability potentially for acts and the work and deliverables of those contractors. So you need to be thinking about that from a de-risk point of view. And I saw a PSA yesterday that some of the obligations being passed to the agency was like they were there. They were there in the hospital, in the hospital, delivering the medical service. Now, if I'm the insurer, I'm going to have a problem with that because that's not what you're insured for. But if your margin, all power to you, if your margin covers the risk of malpractice in that scenario, or covers the risk of a bridge falling over, or covers the risk of data being lost through some negligence or poor outcomes of a contractor in a systems architect role who's being directed by a client, then all power to you if you're covering that margin as an expert consultant. But if you're not, that's the kind of thing that can blow back on you, because it might be the client says, no, that's not our intention. But if they have a significant claim and their insurer gets involved, the insurer doesn't care what conversations you've had with your client about this and what handshake you've done and how great the relationship is. They now see cost, and they're going to look to see who they can go to for that cost. So de-risk strategy number 2 is starting to offset some of that risk around what your contractors are doing day to day. That's the damage to property advice and those sort of things, loss of data, even fraud, stealing money, those sort of things. If we go back to our engagement models and our tenure, think about how you might be able to pass on, or should be thinking about passing on, notice periods. For example, casuals don't have a notice period under Fair Work, under National Employment Standards. If, however, we go back to a tenure conversation and you end up in a situation where there's a claim because the client has continued to roll someone over and you've agreed to that, then you end up with a declaration and you end up having to pay potentially a notice period, a minimum of 1 week up to 12 months under NES. If it's longer, it could be a longer notice period. Minimum entitlements plus annual leave would have to be paid out. If it turns out that there's a redundancy issue, a role's been, there's a redundancy claim, and then there's a redundancy aspect, which then brings an unfair dismissal claim. You might have an underpayment claim for entitlements that are owed to a permanent employee, and you might have an unfair dismissal claim. If you don't offset that risk with your clients in your terms of business, then that sits with you. So that's all well and good, Martin. What do? I put it in my terms of business that that notice periods will be paid by the client, that annual leave redundancy will be paid by the client if it occurs during the assignment. Yes, you do. And what you do is you manage that by giving the client, by having conversations with the client at the tenure stage to say, if you wish to roll over Sally for another 6 months as a casual, and you understand that because you don't want to go to a fixed term or a maximum term engagement, or a different type of engagement, you understand that our risk is exponentially growing, and we are not pricing for that risk. So we need to share that risk. So it's a conversation to give the control to the client to say, no, we don't want to share that risk. So we're going to have to look at something else, another solution. It's not great for Sally, and I fully appreciate that fundamentally this could be an issue, and it flies in the face of employment. But unless you're having a conversation with a client, then you're exposing yourself. And unless you put these things in your terms that I guess promote that conversation, you're prepared to have it, then you are going to potentially have a bit of a risk and a time bomb. And again, coming back to what I was saying with the Upscale helpline, this is happening. And my projection is we're going to be seeing more activity in Fair Work around long tenure contractors who are being whose assignments are being brought to an end. And they're going to look at that, and it's their income. They're not going to be other opportunities, and they're going to see what kind of redress there may be. That's my prediction. Whether it's a big bump or a small bump, it will be a bump. And these cases and these claims exist before this pandemic as well. And a recent experience with a client, wasn't my experience, but they gave me their example, and it was a very costly experience, about $60,000. Which included legal fees, substantial legal fees, plus and ended up having to settle with the contractor. So Fair Work said, not an independent contractor, this person's an employee. It was a 3 years engagement. So it's a bit of a time bomb. Offsetting it through your client terms is a really good way to do it. And all these things I'm talking about are then transposed into PSAs, because 99.9% are incorrect. They don't define your services correctly. They certainly don't allow you to offset any risk. They mix up who your personnel are. There's a whole bunch of issues in PSAs because they're not designed for your unique business model, your unique industry. So all these things I'm talking about transpose into when you go into negotiations. And insurance is the important one as well. You agree to things for which you're not insured, then your insurance won't respond, and you're effectively signing a contract where your insurance will say, sorry, you've signed something that we wouldn't have agreed to, and you haven't talked to us about it, therefore you're uninsured. That happens quite regularly. Or in a drafting sense, I see that all the time for insurance provisions, and they just don't cover. What your insurance just won't respond. So that's de-risk strategy number 2, focused on your clients. Being assertive is not being difficult to do business with. Understanding where your risk sits and how you can help de-risk via your client, and having conversations with them, give the client some control around those decisions and tenure, and performance conversations with contractors, and de-risk via your terms. I'm just going to have a drink. De-risk strategy number 3. Consultants, pillar number 3, and I call it playing the TOB's lottery. And what I mean by that is, let's start with where your TOBs came from. Cut and paste from a previous job, off the internet, and cut and paste and patch together. And I'm being flippant, but at the same time, a few of you are probably smiling because I see it all the time. People come to me, and that's fair enough. You've got a budget, you start a business. You have terms of business because everyone has terms of business, so I'll just use these ones. And I'll cut and paste them, and I'll put them together, and bang, off we go. And, I don't really want to talk about it, but I just have to have them. And then you build a business. You might have started with perm, you build a contracting business, and then you have terms of business which probably might not even cover what you're doing from a service point of view, but you've probably got terms of business that just aren't suitable for what you're doing, and you might not even understand them. So that's the first part of the lottery. What am I dealing with? I'm just plucking terms out. The second thing is, you may have spent some time and some money investing in your terms of business. You may have come to me and said, Martin, I want the best terms of business in the world. And Martin here says, I can give you the best terms of business in the world. That's what I do. And I'll do that. And you pay me, and you have no idea what's in these terms of business. They may have got longer, they may have got shorter. They're probably, they're going to be covering off these risks. You don't actually understand what's in them. You roll them out to your business and your consultants. And then over a period of time, they're all working off a Word document on their desktop, and consultants start to manage their own terms of business. They start to cut things out that they know clients don't like, or one client has said, no, I don't like that clause. So they take it out, and the next client, they use those terms of business. And next thing you know, you're playing the TOB lottery in your office because you have no idea what terms of business are being signed by clients. I have seen this a lot. I saw this at a deco. You think maybe a big company would have their processes together. It still happens today. Consultants are using their own terms of business off their desktop, potentially. So I shouldn't say it's still happening in a deco, but I know it's happening in businesses today. So who knows what on your behalf as a business owner is actually being used in your business. So having the ability to lock down terms of business is probably a good idea. Understanding whether, knowing what's in your terms of business, knowing you're happy with them, going back to what we've just been talking about, are they covering what you need them to cover? And even then, are you playing the lottery within your business because you don't actually know what's being rolled out? And then what's happening if you've got them locked down, and then a client comes back to you on 5 issues. Don't like this, don't like this, don't like this, don't like this. And you say, don't want to be difficult to do business with. And I can't be assertive because I don't actually know what they're talking about, because that brilliant lawyer that wrote my terms of business has written these brilliant clauses, but I never actually got them to explain them, or they explained them and I didn't quite understand them. So how do I now negotiate with my client about what's important to me, because I don't actually understand what is in my terms of business, practically speaking? So it's a risk. And, lawyers are really good at writing stuff. Department of Reading and Writing, as I used to call us. Lawyers, you've all got lawyer jokes and you all pick on lawyers. Not understanding business, being difficult to deal with, focused on risk. Yep. It's the lawyer that goes the next step, or the advisor that goes the next step, or you push back on and say, what does that actually mean? What does that mean? Does this cover me for what's actually important to me in my business? Because you might have things in your business which you can mitigate the risk. So having that conversation and having documents that suit you is really important. If we go back to our contract engagement documents, it's the same with your employment contracts, your casual agreement and your independent contract agreement, your maximum term contract, whatever you're using. Do you understand what's in them? Do they suit what you're trying to do? Do they fundamentally address key risks for you? So lawyers are really good at writing things. You have to be really good at pushing back and understanding them, and then making sure you're not playing the TOB lottery in your business. So that was great fun. I've told you all the things that are wrong, and now you're thinking, what on earth am I going to do with all this? Or you're just going to throw your hands in the air and say, Martin, it's all too hard. It's a really tough market, and I just can't do any of these things. I've got other things to think about. So we'll talk about some solutions, but let's come back to what I wanted you to get out of this session. There is going to be a recovery. Compliance is important. Compliance is a word, right? But I talk about profit enhancement. And Nigel from Staffing Metrics has this great phrase: focus on getting better before you get bigger. And I love that phrase, because that's saying, what have you got today? And what can I do today with the means that I have, the people that I have, the dollars that I have, the time that I have? What can I do today to be preparing my business for the opportunity to hit the recovery in the right shape? And risk, lawyers and risk. I learned a long time ago in business that risk is not just about the bad stuff. Missing an opportunity is a risk. Not being confident in your documents, not being confident in your ability to deliver is a risk in your business, because you haven't taken that opportunity. And the opportunities are few and far between, clearly at the moment. The opportunities will grow. Those who thrive will be there to take care of those, or take advantage of those opportunities. But this is the time to be thinking about, well, what do I need to do to set myself up for the recovery? I'm not saying come and spend money with me. That's why we're here doing this, to give you some tools. But what I am saying is, is a great opportunity, if you can turn your mind to it, to think about, well, what can I do today to work out, if I have a problem in my business, What am I going to do with it? And then what am I going to do to make sure that I can take those opportunities? So the first thing that you could do, if you have an existing contractor book, is to audit them. And that's basically pulling out your contractors and looking at things at the type of, how have you engaged them? Presuming they're on engagement, fixed, like a written engagement. What is that? What did you enter into? Then look at tenure. Has someone, who have I got who's been there for longer than 12 months? That might be the first mark. Then you might have 6 months to 12 months. Then you might have 0 to 6. You might have a tenure question as well to work out. And you might look at host clients. Have I got 10 at this client? Have I got 5 here? Have I got 25 here, 80 here? What have I got? And then, is there a pattern there from a tenure perspective? It's matching the data, checking pay rates, making sure you're paying properly. And if you've got independent contractors, what are my pay rates? And potentially you want to gather that data because you need to understand in the relation to modern awards and minimum entitlements, because if you have an issue based on some of this data, you want to know where you should have sat. You don't want to be underpaying. And then you want to be classifying. So I'd be just picking a traffic light system or whatever you want. Work out if you have a category of high risk contractors, which are long tenure, particularly tenure. Are they a long tenure? And I'm a bit concerned about how I've engaged them. Do I have 80 at one client who I'm concerned about have been there a long time? And I'm concerned about the engagement model, because I'll make this point now, but you're trying to capture data. The thing with working out the host client patterns is what we're doing here is we're quarantining a high risk category of contractors. If you have a high risk category of contractors, which includes contractors that are on the same client, this has another overlay of complexity, which is if one contractor raises an issue, you could have a wildfire scenario where they talk to each other. And unionized workforces, you'd think, well, that's probably where that's going to happen with the union reps, but this happens in white collar as well because they talk. So that is a really important measure of whether you've got a potential high risk category of contractor in your contractor book. So once you've established that, then you can probably establish that if you've got a high risk, and I hope you don't, but if you do, you can quarantine it. You can say, well, we didn't speak to Martin on what day is it? On the 30th. I've forgotten what day of the week it is. We didn't speak to Martin yesterday. We heard from Martin today, and tomorrow is another day. The problem was there before you heard from me. The problem's there now when you're talking to me, and the problem will be there tomorrow. So I can't fix that problem. We can't fix that potential risk that's sitting there, but you can quarantine it, you can understand it, and then you can develop a strategy to deal with that, to deal with your medium-term risk, to deal with your low risk. And that's what you're wanting to do. You need to get the data to understand if you've got a risk, and then you need to develop a plan to work out how you're going to deal with it. And the plan may be, I'm not going to do anything. But at least you've got out of this that you know and you're informed about something that's sitting in your business, which is really what this is about. You don't want to be ignorant to this. You want to at least understand it and then work out how you might have to deal with it, because you don't want to be blindsided by a risk. And again, I hope you don't have any of this risk in your business. I do these exercises. Certex, Diane at Certex, I don't know if any of you know her. She does this audit piece really well, and we're doing more and more of it. And yes, we see risk more than we don't see it. So that's just anecdotally, but it's there because it builds really quickly because you're busy running a business. Now, third-party payroll. I'm pausing because I'm not quite sure where to start here. So a really interesting model in the market, established model in the market, and offer some fantastic services. I've worked with a few of them on behalf of clients and directly, and really good businesses. My experience is though, is that again is not a set and forget. If you're going to be using a third-party payroll or contractor management company, you need to be testing them on how they're engaging the workforce, because ultimately what you're doing is you're subcontracting. So from a contract point of view, client, you, contractor management payroll, and then the contractor, if they're engaging them here in an employment or other relationship. And that's what I'm talking about. You need to be asking questions, not just assuming that the persons you are supplying are being engaged the way you want them to be supplied, and the way you're telling your clients they're being engaged or supplied. You don't want to be exposed to notice periods or other things that are going on. So you have every right to be asking those questions. And like everything in life, if those questions or the answers make you uncomfortable, then you probably want to be asking more questions. So like anything, don't assume that people know that everyone's got this right. It's really difficult to get right, and I'm not having a go at that industry at all. It's a reputable industry. All I'm saying is if you are using them, don't just rely on them like you would in any part of your business. Just rely on what someone's telling you. So use them, but just understand what it is. And the other option, of course, and we mentioned A Positive as a sponsor, but that's another option if you want to engage them directly and you've got some cash flow issues. That's another funding model. And I'm completely agnostic about them. It's just another model that I'm aware of. But anyway, so create a plan. We've been talking about this. That was kind of, I guess, de-risk strategy number one. This is de-risk strategy number two. Audit your terms of business. So do you cover temp services? Pretty simple question, but I do see perm terms that become some kind of Frankenstein model or document that covers temp but really doesn't. Candidates are defined as permanent and contractors, and it's a bit of a hodgepodge. So make sure you've got clear delineation and that you're covering off the issues that I spoke about. Are you de-risking notice periods? Other employment claims? And again, that I alluded to the fact that it's a fairly aggressive position to take. If you work with me, that will be in your terms, but I will explain to you why. And if you want take that position, then you need to be able to have that conversation with your client, because they will see it and they will push back. But I recommend it if you're going to go into these tenure conversations, because you end up in a situation where the tail is wagging the dog if you allow clients to dictate it and you're not covered. And the liability position, what is your service? What am I responsible for? Who's supervising? Who's requesting the output from the contractor? And PSAs, again, only a couple of times in my career with recruitment agencies if I have clients say that's exactly what we expect. It hasn't happened very often. It's more a case that they roll out a contract that they don't really understand. Isn't fit for purpose because it's come from a legal team into a procurement team. It's a services contract that's then rolled out to deliver, your services, which again are very different to a plumber or an on-site IT provider or something. So generally it's because they don't understand your service. It's not that they're trying to be unreasonable and they know exactly what they're doing. So that's just my experience. People are generally pretty reasonable to actually make those changes as long as you raise them. And temp to perm, having good temp to perm, which I hope you all do if that's what you're doing, are really maybe not so pertinent at the moment, but certainly it's a big cost to you if you get that wrong. De-risk strategy number three, pillar number three, locking down your TOBs. Making sure you've got one version that is circulating in your business, centralizing that. Maybe it's a person. Some of my clients will use a central resource that requests come into. Maybe you're using CRM or something to do that. Set them up in a way that minimizes changes. So if you've got clients coming and they're putting lines through your TOBs and they're initialing them, or you send them a Word document and they're just taking out chunks of your terms, or your consultant or you are doing that, set up your document in a way where you can keep your terms consistent at the back and have your changes captured on a front page in a schedule. That means when you have to pull them out, you will easily understand where the variations are without having to hunt through and talk to someone who may have left the business, or try and talk to someone but they've left the business. You don't know what was agreed. So capturing there is a really good way to do it. So you've got consistent terms with exceptions effectively. E-signing. I talked about my number one excuse. My number one question that I get is, what do I do? My client won't sign my terms of business. Completely understand that. It's a massive issue. You're working fast. Clients want jobs filled generally. Clients are hedging their bets. Clients aren't coming out particularly well in this session, and I don't mean to, but clients are sophisticated a lot of the time and they're hedging their bets because I think, well, if I don't sign them, maybe they don't mean anything and I can still keep going, and you're keen to fill the role. So I understand that's really difficult. You don't want to be distracted. E-signing is a pretty easy solution. HelloSign, Adobe Sign, There's a new one out of New Zealand who I met at the Bullhorn conference a couple of weeks ago, Signature Solutions or Signature Signing. So there are lots of options out there to attach your TOBs and send them and get signage back, saving someone having to print them out, sign them, scan them back, whatever it is. So e-signing is a cost-effective option. The unsigned TOBs, and I didn't put it on here, but email templates is a good way to protect you by creating an audit trail. Because when I have conversations with clients around unpaid fees, it's because it's not clear the TOBs aren't signed, and it's not clear what the fee was, how the fee was going to be charged, and when it was going to be charged. Again, probably more relevant in the perm space, but the message is, if you don't have signed terms in any of your business, creating an audit trail via email is effectively reinforcing what the basic contract terms are. This is the person's name, this is the fee, this is the start date, this is the end date. You're creating a trail, because then if a client comes back and says, we never signed TOBs, you can produce some written evidence that they've effectively agreed to these key terms. So when you're disclosing candidate contractor information, having a little blurb on your front cover, or your candidate report, contractor report is also obviously something a lot do. And this is that next step of using an email trail. Contract 101, for those who know this, sorry, but I'll tell you anyway. You don't have to have a written contract to have a binding contract. You need an offer and you need an acceptance. So worst case is there is no contract and you never discussed a contract and you supplied details or a contractor and you didn't have anything agreed, right up to what I call the ink and quill, where you sat there and you signed. And we have the reality in the middle, which is generally a course of business and emails going backward, forward, and phone calls. Capture it in an email form, capture it in an auditable form, so you can pull it out and say, we did have a contract, we had binding terms. That's how I would deal with it. Oh, that shouldn't have been there. FAQ guide. So you got terms and you're happy with them. If you're not happy with them and you're not able to invest in them, you go back and and read them, because I've asked you to go back and read them and see if you can work out you understand them. If you don't, making sure they're what you need. Lawyers will be lawyers, terms will be terms. It's a binding contract. It's a contract terms. Creating an FAQ or a Q&A guide, which is plain English, is something that I use with my terms of business. I will not supply terms of business to a client without this, by the way, because I've already touched on this. I'm not doing my job if I give you the world's greatest document that you'll never use or you don't understand. So a Q&A, what is my service? What am I doing? What are my payment terms? What happens if a temp damages some equipment? Foreseeing the questions that a client may ask and having a plain English answer that refers back to your terms. This is why we do this. You can use that with your consultants to allow them to be having these conversations and being more empowered to negotiate or push back and be assertive. It means you're getting more, I guess, as a business owner and a senior manager, you're getting more comfort that you're going to have a consistent message going out. And ultimately, you can even provide it to clients if clients are asking questions, and you may want to just give them the Q&A. As a bit of a, as part of your proposal or something, a shortened version or something, just to explain and head off some of those conversations. So there's more understanding around what you do. And often, perhaps clients don't understand what you do or what you get paid for. There might be a base level understanding, but if there's assumptions, like in any industry, if you're making assumptions that clients actually understand it, you may be doing yourself a disservice. Because they might not actually understand. It might be a great opportunity to explain it and head off some of these conversations and even get your terms signed. I don't know, but we all fall for that. I often say to younger lawyers that I don't. In-house was a great thing. I don't go halfway. Clients don't meet me halfway. I go 95% of the way because I have to, because I can't assume that what I do is understood. Hence the Q&A guide. And same for you. I would say, find a way to perhaps go that little bit further and not make assumptions around what clients do and don't understand. So changing, I've talked about the first things. Do you understand your terms? Can your consultants negotiate changes effectively? And that's where a Q&A can help. And it can save you time because you're able to get into those sales calls or the sales process a lot faster if you can get your terms signed off, or you can get them understood and clients agree and they feel more certain about what you're doing for them. So in my experience, the reason I don't deliver TOBs without a Q&A is, in my experience, the clients who just wanted TOBs are the ones that come back to me and complain, for want of a better term. They don't complain, but they're the ones that have troubles because they haven't been armed with information they need to get them signed and to understand them. So that's why I just now, it makes more sense that you have a Q&A guide. And I guess my last tip or solution is, here's a nice rendered version of my ebook, which I will pop. We'll minimize this because we're coming to the end here. I've got through this pretty quickly. I'll drop you, there's a link there. It's free. You can grab a copy. It's covered a lot of the stuff that I've been through today, plus some extra. I found it really useful. It's been really, the industry's been really receptive. I've got tips in there and all the things that I've spoken about today, and my own little tips of the trade based on my experience. So there's a solution right there for you for free if you'd like to grab it. It'll capture a lot of what we've talked about today. So Tony, I have got through that very quickly. I know everyone's busy and we did have 2 hours assigned, but yeah, I just wanted to get through that so everyone can get on with their days, and happy to take as many questions as we need.
Yeah, very good, Martin. Okay, if anyone wants to chat up any questions, Martin, you can hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good. All right, I've just got one through. You talk about training your own team in understanding terms of business. What about clients themselves? You know, maybe it's their legal department that signed off on terms. Have you noticed that there is a need to really communicate the actual meaning of terms at client side as well? And how would you very tactfully take your client through terms so that they really understand it, so there is no misunderstanding without upsetting the relationship in these sensitive times?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I did touch on it a little bit, but it's one thing that I've noticed I guess I've been focused on a bit more, and I call it the client onboarding. You know, as I said, I went to this Bullhorn conference, and you know, it's a CRM Bullhorn, and they had all their providers come up and do a little spiel, and everyone was there at the expo, but everyone's focused on the candidate. And I don't see a lot of focus on the client onboarding piece, even from a safety perspective. It's very transactional. So this to me fits into that, bringing the client on the journey. And yeah, if you're dealing with a large corporate, and I've sat in those legal teams where you may have a TA, you might have a talent acquisition person or an HR person. You'll have a procurement department, which might be running a process. And then you'll have a legal department, which is dictating to the procurement department about what contract to use, and procurement department dictating to the internal person about price and the like. So it can be really difficult. Being able to explain things in plain English and keep the lawyers out of it is my tip. So don't try and have legal conversations. I always talk about having legal conversations in a commercial context. But if you can bring clients on board about why it is that you need certain things and explain it in the context of your business, that will go a long way, because you're trying to blunt people within businesses such as legal teams not having the information, and they're just making decisions. They're not an expert in recruitment. They're an expert in banking, or they're an expert in iron ore, or whatever they're an expert in their legal department for their business. So they don't actually know what you do, and you're just another service provider, and you know, we need this risk profile. So I don't know if that helps, but certainly the Q&A guide can be really good. I didn't actually touch on it, but I probably should have. I guess I implied it. The training of all this stuff for your team is vital, because you need your team on board, and they're the ones having these conversations. And, you know, I spend a lot of time in those in-house roles doing training, and I do it now, and I do this sort of stuff, because actually having people delivering your message for you is your best way of managing your risk and taking those opportunities. So taking them through this and showing them how to have these conversations, do some negotiation training, run some exercises. We used to do all that. You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, dry PowerPoint. You could run a session with your team where you have a scenario and you put two people at the front who pre-agree to do it, and have one as a client, one as a consultant, and, you know, have some negotiation and throw some different scenarios and, you know, have a bit of fun with it. But you want to make sure that people are prepared to have those conversations with the client, work out who in the client is important as well. Hope that helps.
Yeah, really good, Martin. Now, Martin, some people have to go at one, and that's fine. Everyone, we will send you a copy of the presentation. But just one more quick question before we do finish up, and that's around some predominantly perm businesses are moving into temp and contract for the first time in this market, because it obviously makes sense to have that alternative offering. Any quick words of advice for those that are relatively new from a legal perspective, but also will be a reminder to those that have been doing it for some time?
Well, I think this whole presentation has kind of covered the things to think about. I'll give a non-legal answer and say cash flow. You know, consider, because you're running a payroll business, if your clients are going to push you out, and they're going to push you out in today's market, and they'll push you out anyway, potentially on payment terms. If you're engaging a workforce where you're paying them weekly and you're not going to be paid by the client for 30 days, then you've got a cash flow management issue, obviously, and you need to manage that legally, and you need to manage that within your business. So you need your TOBs to be very clear on payment terms, and you need to be very clear on those other potential costs that you might incur, because it's not just about charging a margin or a base rate and on costs and margin. It's that ramifications of those decisions that you're making now in 6 months, in 12 months time. And grab my ebook, that'll help.
All right. Anybody else? If you want to type a question into the chat box, do that now. You just hover down there and find chat down the bottom. And if you've got a question, here we've got a question in from Fred that's sent to everyone here, Martin. Are PAYE employees still at risk if they're being paid significantly over the award?
Really good question. So it comes down to your offset potentially, because you could have a double dip scenario. So less risk. Fair Work's going to be less interested traditionally in high net worth contractors who are being paid considerably over an award, if an award applies. Otherwise, you're dealing with a minimum wage, which is about $19. So, you know, if they're way over that, then your risk is lower. What I tend to see is they've engaged as an independent contractor, and the contract, they then ask for a declaration, and it's effectively a double dip if you don't have offset clauses in your contract. So yes, there is still a risk. It's about how your contract is set up as much as anything.
Okay, very good. All right. Now you just sent the link through. We've got a couple of links. We've got your ebook here too, Martin. Obviously, a lot of what you've covered is some of it is very particular to each individual business in different sectors, but you've given a very, very detailed overview of the whole picture. And if everyone wants to talk to Martin about their individual situations, obviously do. Many of our Captain's Table members on this call already have utilised your services before. Martin, just finally, maybe the last thing I want to ask you is what are the typical questions that you're getting at the moment from your client base?
Unpaid, yep, happy to. Unpaid fees. Candidates, as in a perm context, candidates have signed a contract and the contract's been withdrawn, or the offer's been withdrawn. So I've had that question quite a lot. And from an agency perspective, from a recruiter perspective, it's obviously putting fees at risk. Contract is between, you know, the candidate and the new employer. And if they've signed, that's a whole contract question. But from an agency, it's about payment. Am I going to get paid, I guess? And that comes back to TOBs. 50-50, and we've talked about this in Captain's Table. Do your TOBs say you'll be paid for a perm fee on delivering your service, so when the offer is accepted, or do you get paid when the candidate commences? I have a very firm view that why would you wait? You've delivered your service. I know Greg Savage, I was reading his blog yesterday, he has the same view, because you're effectively pushing out your payment terms. So maybe you could revisit that because that could become more of a risk in a nervous market. Yeah. So that's another question. This one about assignments being ended and potential liabilities has come up a few times. And the other questions, I'll be honest, are not the good ones. They're dealing with internal staff issues around businesses hitting the wall really quickly. So handling staff issues. And that's a big one as well, isn't it? Handling your own staff legal issues. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, if I don't have any more questions. Oh, sorry, Tony. Sorry. I should say at the other extreme, I've had quite a lot of new business from sectors that are doing really well. So to be optimistic, there are people who are doing well in this sector because they've pivoted or they're ready to go. So yeah, I've had quite a lot of new business as well, which is awesome.
Oh, really good, Martin. Well, thank you, Martin. Look, really excellent. As usual, a ton of great content. We'll be sending your presentation out to everybody with your contact details there. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the really good preparation and thought you put into that. We really do appreciate it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just take back, reclaim the host back to me now. And I want to just in closing mention a couple of things to everybody just before you do go. Thank you all obviously for being here, really good turnout, and thanks for embracing our webinar platform. I hope you found it reasonably good and that we're saving a lot of travel time obviously. And but I also want to mention to you, we've got Adele speaking tomorrow on recruitment survival skills. So Adele, I think everyone can see you right now. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. If anyone needs to book on that, you've got the links from us already. And we want to do more on this temp and contract stuff going forward. Adele and I are putting our heads together for the next captain's table, which will be the end of April, on really how to be building temp and contract, but not just building it, how to manage it better, how to transition your business that could have been quite heavy on the perm side, how to supplement it with some good temp and contract skills. So we'll be working on that. So look, thanks again to our great supporters who have got plenty of resources for you. As I've mentioned before, they can really help you. Job Adder, A Positive, Digit Pro, Succession Plus, and William Buck. By now you should know them in the industry, and as I said, I encourage you to be in touch just to find out what they can be offering you. They're all thinking about what they can be doing to support you as owners and leaders of recruitment companies, and you'll be really surprised at some of the resources many of these companies are freeing up to support you. So thank you everyone very much for being here today. And we'll be in touch with a copy of the presentation and some offers from our supporters, and also for our next captains and consultants meetings coming up. So thank you all very much.